Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen called the police on my family for swimming at a public beach. She claims to be the owner of this beach and thus she can ban us from the premises. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the stories. I don't usually get to spend a lot of time with my only son, Hee-yun, but Sundays were exceptions. And by the way, I think Hee-yun is a Korean boy name. But either way, despite the fact that my job is very time-consuming, I would wrap everything up during the weekdays and ensure I would have the whole day to spend with my family. Immigrating from Seoul, South Korea had been very taxing on Hee-yun. It's been almost 8 years now, but I know he still finds it hard to fit in at school. He had always been a sensitive child, but also incredibly patient. Most 12-year-olds would not have the patience to be able to fish, but surprisingly, he did. Visiting the beach every Sunday to catch a few fishes and do a bit of swimming was our thing. It was an activity only we shared, as my wife had no interest in waking up at sunrise on the one day we got to sleep in. Being early meant we got to watch the sunrise and managed to beat the crowd. It was usually pretty rare to find many people at the beach around that time. Even the usual beach runners would take a break on Sundays. Watching the sky shift from violet to orange to blue with my favorite person, aka my son, was everything I could ever ask for. Last Sunday started out no different. My son and I left the house while it was still slightly dark out and I drove towards the beach. We parked at our usual parking spot as it was the most convenient to bring the equipment out to the shore. As we were setting up the rods, the sun began peeking out from beyond the ocean and it was just as mesmerizing as the first sunrise we watched together. I was absolutely convinced that even if we caught no fish, nothing could ruin today. The stretch we occupied was empty, save for the one runner who had decided to stop beside us and watch us fish. He seemed very curious about the whole process and we were more than happy to show him. It was the perfect spot to watch the sunrise and he had finished his run, so he sat there behind us a few meters behind to ensure the handling of the rods was not disturbed. He told us that his name was Jared and Hee-yun even shared some of the snacks he had packed the night before with him. It was times like this that made parking the car with an eyesight of where we were so beneficial. We could grab anything we needed from there, and by this time a few other people could be seen around the beach and the food trucks had arrived too. Jared said he would go grab something to eat and he was soon out of eyesight. By now we had caught 3 fishes and I was thinking about calling it a day and heading back home after reeling back the lines we had already cast. I noticed a car pull up right beside ours. I figured the driver of this new car would simply find another part of the 8-mile-long shore to spend their time on, but to my surprise the blonde woman walked straight towards us, coming out of the car. We got a lot of people who were interested in checking out what we had managed to catch, but she did not look very interested. She strutted towards us and declared that we cannot be here. I was confused as fishing was certainly legal here and I had made sure of it. She stated in a very official matter-of-fact manner that the beach does not belong to me, but instead it belongs to her. She also noted that she saw us swimming here and that this is especially highly illegal because we are polluting the ocean. This was enough for me to understand that she was one of those types of entitled white women that were referred to as a Karen. I didn't want Hee-yun to have to deal with this on his day off, so I instructed him to take today's catch to the car and then turn towards the lady that was clearly growing more impatient. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I just have to quickly interject here because certainly Karens are not only white women, because in real life I have seen my fair share of entitled Asian Karens as well. Anyway, I kept my cool as I told her that I was fully aware of the fact that this beach is public property, which meant I was permitted to fish. I further explained that fishing is legal and that I was not bothering anybody considering it was a really long beach and I was early enough to miss the crowd. She cut me off screaming that it is American public property and since she is an American woman by birth, she owns all the beaches in the state. Karen was growing more volatile by the minute and I wanted to avoid a huge scene in front of my son, but that was getting harder. I saw Hee-yun walk back towards us and I immediately told him to wait in the car while I bring the rods back. Karen took offense that I had the audacity to speak over her and began yelling even more. Her body language was getting more violent as she kept moving her hands around. The blonde woman wanted me to leave the rods as a fine for trespassing onto American property. This was just absurd. It got much harder to keep my cool, but I still tried. She told me she was going to call the police if I did not leave immediately without my rods, and I called her bluff. Just to prove that she actually meant it, she dialed 911 and her expression of rage quickly changed to fear. She went on to rant to an officer about how she felt threatened by an immigrant who was trying to take her fishing rods. I grew increasingly worried about my son when the cops actually believed this and were headed over to the beach. It did not take them very long to arrive since there was a precinct located very close to our location. Just when the cops came over, Jared was coming back to the fishing spot with a couple of drinks in his hand. He watched from afar as Karen explained her version of what had happened in a very animated manner. She had completely transformed into the victim and explained how her rights were being violated. Once she was done, I explained to the pair of officers my version of the situation. I had overwhelming evidence that I was right, as the fishes that we caught were also in my car. It certainly helped that this was when Jared stepped in, and I informed the police officers that he had spent the entire morning with us as we caught the fish, and he had just left to grab us food when Karen showed up and decided to call the cops for no reason. The officers were obviously smart enough to understand what had actually happened and decided to look up Karen's past records. To no one's surprise, she had already had 2 cases of false accusations, one against a person of color and one against another immigrant. The officers notified me that I could press charges against her for harassment and she would be in real trouble. I considered it, but taking this to court would be a huge procedure and most importantly, it would further ruin Hyun's day. Karen looked baffled that she once again found herself at the mercy of someone she viewed as inferior. It would have felt so satisfying to serve her the same fate she wanted me to have by getting her arrested, but for Hyun's sake, I decided against it and chose to walk away. I was certain she would find herself in a worse situation pretty soon, considering her ignorant and entitled attitude. Update to the story: a few weeks later I saw the aforementioned Karen in a local newspaper. Apparently she committed a hit and run after crashing into a Chinese grocery store. A police chase ensued and she ended up in jail for driving without a license in a stolen car while under the influence. I guess that is what you call karma. And yeah, ripe stars, if you have watched until here and enjoy my stories, I would really appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video if you want to support me. Thank you so much in advance, your support is very much appreciated. The next one is titled, HOA should not have messed with us. About 25 years ago, my parents built their dream house. Although the house is now in the middle of a large metroplex, when they built it, it was in the fringes of the countryside with rapid development over 2 decades. When they bought the lot, they were the first to purchase from the developer. The developer sold to 3 original neighbors, my parents plus 2 others, all at the end of the cul-de-sac in a row. The other streets in this plat became a large subdivision with a fancy name that would come to bear a lot of prestige. But that meant being part of an HOA. They did not want that. The developer would not sell them the land without an HOA. If you're not a part of the community, you will need to form your own HOA and get it approved. So my dad, with a beatific grin, said he would be the HOA president of our single suburban street. He and the 2 neighbors drafted the bylaws of their own HOA in strict accordance with the planned neighborhood. But they added a special provision that the president of the HOA could name a successor instead of having the street vote on one. Absent a majority rejection, the successor would be the president, essentially trying to avoid terms and campaigning while still offering folks a way to dispute the HOA president, which is important for later. So, in the winter of 1994, my father very seriously took the thick black CD binder full of laminated and hole-punched instructions and pages on how to be a good HOA president and put that binder in the very back of a cabinet and forgot about it for the next 16 years. The homeowners of our street were not asked to pay an annual fee, and the HOA did not police number of cars, colors of front doors, or any other ridiculous standards HOAs usually enforce. As it was a quiet cul-de-sac, no one did anything more egregious than the occasional reckless teenager. Then a new family built the house across from us. It consisted of 2 children, a husband and a stay-at-home mom we will call Gladys. Kravitz for the bewitched fans. Now, Gladys was a real busybody. And by the way, that almost sounds like GLaDOS from Portal, but I guess that's not really related here. So she would stand at the front windows of her house to watch and patrol which cars were using the cul-de-sac to turn around when houses down the street held events and parties and were using the front of her house to park for literally one night, and then sending noise complaints to the police about barking dogs, her other neighbor's kids, there were 6 in a blended family, as well as the other neighbor's cars, which were collectors not even repairing cars, and other ridiculously petty things. She did not have a job, so safety patrol became her whole identity. She would always hurry over to gossip whenever my mom was taking out the trash cans to the curb. Sadly, my dad contracted a neuromuscular disease in 2005. It got bad pretty quickly and he was confined to a wheelchair. I learned to drive for my hardship license in a handicap van, and we had more than the usual number of cars due to the round-the-clock caregivers in the later years. Gladys decided it was time to offer help to my poor mother, who was slaving absurd hours just to keep creditors at bay. Gladys very sweetly approached, expressed her sympathies for our struggles, and pointed out the number of cars in our driveway and generously, so generously, offered to take over the president of the HOA duties if my father would name her the successor. After being hounded the 6th or 7th time, and Gladys hinting that if my mom was struggling so much, maybe she could send my dad to hospice and move houses to something more suited. In fact, Gladys' best friend was looking for a house and would love to live across the street and buy our house. My mom effing snapped. She basically told Gladys to stop asking and that her husband was dying, and it was incredibly insensitive and rude to offer to kick us out of the neighborhood and take over just because she wanted clout to annoy the neighbors about letting kids play basketball after 6 p.m. Gladys responded nastily that my dad would have to name a successor because when he died, soon, the HOA presidency would revert back for election. Okay then Gladys, you're absolutely right. My dad should name someone the HOA president as his successor after his 16-year reign. Malicious compliance activated. After my dad died, my mom found out she was named as the next HOA president in my dad's will. Dad never said anything about it while he was alive, but his humor was always understated. Gladys was apologetic and she tried to overturn the successor claim and run against my mom, but nobody else on the street contested the choice. No one, all new neighbors after 20 years, even knew we had a special single street HOA, and for another 9 years my mom did absolutely nothing as HOA president. My mom had to sell the home in 2019 very unwillingly, as it was the house my parents built together. But with the development of the city, property taxes had risen too high and priced her out. I took a week off work to fly out and help her pack, and while packing up the house we found my dad's OG 1994 HOA binder, bylaws and all. And of course, mom had to name an HOA successor, so this time she did comply. The malicious part was war against everyone else. Very ceremoniously, my mom finally named Gladys the president of the HOA and gave her the binder, which apparently has long since been digitized and something Gladys had been reading for fun in preparation of this moment. Apparently Gladys went rabid with the power, as her kids had gone off to college and promptly charged everyone on the street $100 a month towards neighborhood incidentals. Supposedly for mowing the strip that people just mowed themselves, and a highly encouraged neighborhood barbecue one Saturday a month to address the neighborhood concerns. She also outlawed basketball hoops in driveways, dictated no cars could be parked on the street or in driveways but only in garages. Things like landscaping and holiday decor approval and other inane, absurd power trips. My mom kept her Nextdoor app open and watched Gladys go down in flames. 3 separate households moved and dropped long hate-filled call-out posts about Gladys, making their lives a misery until they couldn't stand it anymore. That is 3 of 12 houses, by the way. So yeah, Gladys wrecked the single street HOA with a quarter loss. Gladys got everything she wanted: my dad to name an HOA successor, my mom to name an HOA successor, for us to move away, and for her to finally be the HOA president. And now everyone absolutely hates her and no one will pay her $100 or go to her barbecues. And before my mom finally deleted the street from her next door, it seems that the rest of the street had voted to hold an election for a new HOA president. Her tenure lasted 6 months. Gladys does not understand why people talk so fondly about my parents as the most ideal HOA president, since they never did a thing. My mom is 2 years into her new home and does not miss the neighborhood anymore at all. Okay, edit, so everyone is super mad at my mom for ruining many lives like Syndrome from The Incredibles. Let me explain how the handoff/nomination went. Holy crap, Secret Garden. The moving truck is coming in 1 hour and we still have not cleaned out all the shelves in this study. What do? Just start throwing random stuff in boxes, mom. And by the way, here's a trash bag for old cords and papers. Oh, my word, your father's old HOA binder. Toss it. No. We can't do that. I think this is supposed to be kept by the city or something. Mom, we don't have time. We can mail it to the city or something. Honey, run it over to Gladys. Mom, are you sure? She's always been bugging me about it. She can keep it, and now run. I then literally tear downstairs, race across the street, ring the doorbell, and shove the binder into Gladys' hands with a "My mom says this is yours, and now bye," and raced back to find out the Christmas decorations were still in a forgotten cabinet and needed to be thrown into a trash bag. Literally zero premediation and 100% aggravated meltdowns about moving. I cannot stress how much my mom did not want to move. I took out a lot of the emotional parts originally in the draft as not necessary and limiting word count. My dad built her that house. The first night in the new house, she, as a 58-year-old woman, cried until 4 AM begging to go home. She loved our neighborhood, our street, and our house. She did not try to ruin her neighbors' lives. We did not know anyone left on the street by that point anyway. They had all been priced out and moved too, except Gladys. The end line is kind of a throwaway saying my mom is doing much better now and she does not miss Gladys at all. I do feel bad for all those folks driven out by Gladys' dumb rules, but I'm also going to say the high property taxes probably did not help. If I ever won the lottery, the first thing I would do would be to buy our house back and put it in trust and let my mom live there for the rest of their life. Anyway, to the commenters saying my dad was a legend, he absolutely was. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, not only the dad was an absolute legend, but maybe the entire family. I gotta say, the way they handled Gladys was, to say the least, just unique, and I've never seen something like this in a Reddit story before. If you have ever dealt with any HOAs, then let us know how it went in the comments. I would really appreciate your comments. The next one is titled Security Light Revenge. Years ago, when my wife and I had purchased a home, the builder had told us it might be part of an HOA depending on how many homes they ultimately constructed. We were among the first 5 buyers, so we pretty much had free rein to change what we wanted via permissions from the builders that those changes would be added to what was turned over to the HOA, and for as long as we lived there, the changes could stay. The one change we did was add a motion security light on the back of our fence because my neighbor's kid would smoke weed there and I did not want to smell it sitting on my patio or when I had the windows open on nice evenings. Well, that went up my neighbor's butt sideways for whatever reason, and she refused to believe that her kid would be doing that even though it did not point towards any other home, just the grass between my fence and the woods. It kept the kids from smoking weed there without calling the cops on something so foolish and petty. But since it was cleared from the builder, she could not do anything. Well, 6 months later we end out with an HOA and she makes it priority number 1 to get the lights, several other neighbors followed what I did whose home faced the wooded area, removed. The requirement to get it changed since they were builder approved was 80% of the community, so the only votes to keep came from those of us on the back of the property. So we have to remove them being permanent changes. Not even 3 days later, her kid is again back there smoking weed. The HOA counter to why I had it was to call the police non-emergency number, but that's absolutely stupid to risk some kid's life up because he wanted to smoke something. When that is an issue, his parents, who remember don't believe he does it, deal with. So now I am pretty livid. This North American land whale cried to the point that I had to remove a cheap and non-disruptive fix because she refused to be a parent and keep her kid from impeding on us, so it is time for me to be petty. The next day after her kid first went back there, I go out and buy a 12-foot section of 4x4 wire concrete, a large planter and 3 6,000 lumen floodlights and build essentially a mini portable stadium light setup rigged to the motion sensor, so whenever anyone passed by my fence, instead of being a small area, immediately behind my house lit up, the sun came out of the woods with one light giving her home an X-ray. The first time her kid went back there, it was glorious, so I got a picture of him with his bong in his hand before he skirted off so I could show her proof. And it sent her through the roof getting those free X-rays. I showed her the picture and she still did not care, saying if it goes off again I will call the police. And I was fine with it because I told her they would see the same picture I had just shown her. In reality they would not, but Martha, the manatee, did not know that, and I did not expect her to try to call my bluff, which she never did. She just complained to the HOA a lot. In the morning time I would lay the contraption down so it could not be seen and raise it up after it got dark. About a week after this I get a summons to the HOA meeting that is happening that week, and since it was disciplinary for my contraption, their lawyer was there and they wanted to hear my case. So I lay everything out from the builder to pictures showing how the original light did not shine any brighter than the one on her porch and could not be seen from inside their homes, as well as her vendetta to change the HOA rules to suit what she wanted. 3 of the 5 other neighbors who had to remove their security lights were also there to argue for getting them back when I went. After about 40 minutes, the lawyer comes back and pretty much said, "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Chief Brutus, you are right. This is not a permanent structure, so it is technically allowed. However, you cannot have a light facing her property any longer. In addition, by the 1st of next month, you will all be allowed to reinstall your smaller lights, as they did provide a measure of security that benefits the property as a whole." So Martha, the manatee, was blessed with another week of the sun on a pole and being mad about it. Those of us who lived facing the woods got our lights back, and after reselling the lights, I made most of my money back that I spent on supplies making that monstrosity. It was absolutely worth spending the few $100s to out-petty a bad parent and insufferable neighbor. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say that was textbook petty revenge.